Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a life that looks quiet on the surface, but is anything but easy. A young monk waking up in his scriptorium cell. Imagine it with me. You lie on a straw-stuffed pallet, scratchy wool blanket tangled around your legs. The stone beneath you breathes cold into your bones. A bell tolls somewhere out in the cloister, the deep iron hum rolling through the corridors. It's still dark, though a faint blue light leaks in through the slit of your tiny window. You probably won't survive this schedule if you were dropped here today. But for monks in the Middle Ages, this was just a Tuesday. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what's your local time? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up, stiff joints protesting as you rub at your eyes. Your cell is barely wider than your arms stretched out, and the walls are damp, spotted with patches of lime. A tiny wooden cross hangs above the door, its surface darkened by years of fingers brushing past. From outside, you hear the shuffle of other sandals on stone, the coughing of an elder brother, and the faint whisper of a draft sneaking under the door. There's no alarm clock, no snooze button, just the steady rhythm of bells calling you to prayer. And whether you're ready or not, you go. You slide your feet onto the flagstones, cold as if someone stored them in an icebox overnight. A little joke in your head. Medieval monks invented the concept of cold plunges long before Instagram influencers. The rough wool of your robe scratches your skin as you pull it over your head, the smell of lanolin and last night's smoke clinging to the fibers. Here's a simple fact. Monasteries kept strict hours, marking each day with prayers and labor from before dawn until after dark. The quirky detail? Some monks were convinced sleeping too long was practically sinful, so a 6-hour night felt luxurious. Historians still argue whether this rigid schedule was spiritually inspiring or just a convenient way for abbots to squeeze more productivity from their communities. You shuffle toward the door, hand brushing the stone as you steady yourself. The corridor is dim, lit only by a few guttering rushlights. Shadows of other monks sway ahead of you, like pale ghosts wrapped in wool. Your stomach grumbles faintly, but food will have to wait. The first order of the day is chant, and the only warmth you'll find comes from your own breath in the chill morning air. And so, with bells still echoing in your chest, you join the line of silent figures, ready to slip into the rhythm of prayers. You shuffle along the stone passage with the others, your feet making the faintest slap of leather against flagstone. The sound is almost rhythmic, like 100 soft drum beats in the half-dark. The corridor bends, and a door opens onto the cloister walk. Night air drifts in, carrying a damp chill that pricks your cheeks. The moon still lingers above the abbey roof, silvering the edge of the courtyard. You tighten your robe and breathe out, watching your own mist rise and vanish, as if even your breath is practicing humility. The bells ring again, low, deliberate, each note leaving space for silence to bloom. You file into the church with the others. Candles burn in iron stands, dripping wax that cools in ragged cascades. The air smells faintly of beeswax and old stone, with an undertone of damp wool. You settle onto a wooden stall, the plank beneath you creaking in sympathy with your weary bones. The abbot lifts a hand, and in near-perfect unison, the choir begins the morning chant. The sound is not hurried. It rolls like a tide, one note flowing into the next. You open your mouth and join, though your voice is rough with sleep. The chant weaves through the church, rising into the vaulted arches above. If you close your eyes, you might mistake yourself for a thread in a tapestry, woven into something larger than your body. That's the idea, anyway. Becoming one voice, one heart, one purpose. Or at least, pretending you're not thinking about how much your stomach already misses bread. Here's a plain fact. Monastic communities organized their days around the canonical hours. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. Each was marked by prayer, keeping monks busy enough that they couldn't claim idleness. And here's your quirky tidbit. In some houses, sleepy novices would literally nod off mid-chant, only to be nudged awake by their neighbor. A few abbots supposedly kept tally marks of these slip-ups, as though falling asleep during Psalm 23 was a measurable sin. Historians still argue whether those tallies were meant to shame or simply to amuse the older brothers. The chant winds on, Latin syllables flowing endlessly. You don't always understand the words. You're still learning. But the rhythm seeps into your bones. It's oddly hypnotic, as though the repetition itself scrubs your mind clean. Somewhere behind you, a brother clears his throat, breaking the spell for a moment. The abbot glances sideways, sharp as a hawk, but the chant does not falter. After the final verse drifts away, silence folds itself back over the stalls. You bow your head, rising only when the signal comes. The service ends not with applause or dramatic flourish, but with the simple scraping of wood as benches empty. Life in the abbey is never about applause. You're supposed to lose yourself in the tide of ritual until your own edges blur. Whether you ever succeed, well, that's a lifelong project. You file out again, through the cloister, your sandals brushing up little whispers of grit. The courtyard is gray with the first hint of dawn. A blackbird sings, the single wild voice in contrast to your choral hum. You can't help but notice how much livelier that one bird sounds compared to 24 monks mumbling into stone. But then again, the bird doesn't have an abbot glaring at it, so perhaps it sings with more freedom. Tasks await. Morning chores are the invisible backbone of this life. Simple, repetitive, thankless. You sweep the cloister walk with a stiff broom made of twigs. Each stroke raises a faint smell of dust and damp stone. Another brother tends the lamp niches, scraping out old wax with a little knife, muttering as it clings stubbornly to the iron. Someone else draws water from the well, his rope squealing as it rubs against the wood. You feel the ache in your arm as you sweep, the muscles unused to this kind of steady labor. There's no choice but to keep at it. At least sweeping has a kind of visible payoff. The stones look a shade less grimy, the walkway a little less scattered with leaves. It's more than you can say for hours of copying a psalm, where the letters blur until your mind wonders if you've actually accomplished anything at all. By the time you've circled the cloister twice, the eastern sky is streaked with pale gold. A light drizzle begins to fall, thin drops making soft taps on the cloister roof. The damp smell sharpens, like crushed nettles and rain on old limestone. You pause to watch a droplet crawl down the edge of your broom handle, glimmering before it falls away. A brother passes you, balancing a basket of laundry on his hip. The robes inside are the same drab brown you wear, though one has a patch at the elbow stitched in bright red thread. It makes you smile, just a little, to see rebellion expressed through embroidery. He catches your glance and shrugs, as if to say, "What else was I supposed to do?" Your stomach complains again, louder this time. A promise of bread and thin broth tugs at you. But first, more sweeping, more bending, more rubbing at stubborn smears of soot on stone. You think briefly of your life before vows, perhaps a village, a family, a warm hearth. but the memory feels hazy, like smoke seen from afar. Here, your life is measured by bells, broom strokes, chants, and empty bowls. And yet, there's a strange comfort in that, a predictability. You know exactly what you'll do an hour from now, and the hour after that. In a world outside the walls, where warlords squabble and fields fail and taxes bite, this rigid rhythm offers something rare: certainty. Monasticism thrives on monotony. As the drizzle fades, a whistle blows from the refectory door. A signal. Chores pause, and breakfast is near. Relief passes through the group like a shared sigh. You lean your broom against the wall and fall into line with the others. The promise of bread may be meager, but in this place, it is enough to keep you moving. Your sandals scrape once more over the flagstones. The bells don't ring this time. The abbot doesn't waste iron on signaling food. The rhythm of your steps and the anticipation in your belly are signal enough. And so you follow the line of brown-robed figures into the hall, ready to sit in silence again. But this time, with bread in hand. The refectory smells faintly of wood smoke and damp cloth as you enter. The long benches polished smooth by generations of robes sliding in and out. The hall is tall but not grand, its beams dark with soot, its windows narrow slits that admit only pale daylight. A crucifix looms over the far wall, reminding everyone that even eating is a kind of worship here. You file in silently with the others, hands folded inside your sleeves, the rustle of wool the only conversation. At your place, a small hunk of coarse bread waits, along with a wooden bowl already half filled with thin broth. The broth steams faintly, though not enough to disguise its watery nature. You lower yourself onto the bench and inhale. It smells of cabbage, perhaps a bone boiled yesterday and reboiled today until it surrendered the ghost of flavor. Beside it, the bread feels heavy, but not soft. The crust rough enough to scratch your gums. Still, your stomach perks up, eager for anything. The abbot raises a hand, and silence deepens. A lector begins to read aloud from scripture, his voice echoing strangely in the rafters. The Latin syllables tumble on, solemn and steady. No chatter, no jokes, no commentary. Meals here are not for talking, but for chewing quietly, while letting holy words fill the gaps. You lift your spoon, dip it into the broth, and sip. Warmth seeps through you, faint but real. The bread is chewed slowly, the crumbs sticking to your teeth, demanding patience. You think, not for the first time, that heaven might just be bread baked with butter melting across it. A mainstream fact for you: monastic rules often demanded silence in the refectory. Speech was seen as indulgence, a wayward distraction from devotion. But here's the quirky side. Monks sometimes developed elaborate hand signs to get around the rule, inventing little gestures for salt, bread, or even stop snoring. Historians still argue whether these sign languages were official or just tolerated acts of communal mischief. The lector's voice drifts on. You spoon up another mouthful of broth and notice that a faint sheen of oil floats on top, catching the light. Your stomach feels calmer already, though it still hopes for more. Around you, the steady rhythm of spoons against bowls builds into its own kind of chant. Soft clinks and slurps, like an orchestra of hunger being politely restrained. You allow yourself one small smile when you realize the monk across from you eats so slowly he might still be on his first spoonful by the time you're finished. Patience is a virtue, but perhaps some of us take it too literally. The bread softens as you dip it into the broth, crumbling but easier to swallow. You savor each bite, though your mind drifts toward chores and duties waiting beyond this meal. You know the day stretches long ahead, scraping quills, grinding ink, squinting over vellum until your eyes ache. A small part of you dreads it, though another part leans into the rhythm. In a way, each moment of hunger, each sip of broth, becomes part of that rhythm. When the last crumb is gone, you set your bread knife down carefully, the blade dull from years of use. The lector's voice halts, replaced by silence once more. The abbot gives a nod, and the benches creak as everyone rises. Bowls are gathered, spoons clink into buckets, crumbs brushed onto the floor for sweeping later. There is no lingering, no second helpings, no lazy sipping of ale. You march out as you came in, silent and orderly, your hunger only partly satisfied, but your duty fulfilled. The cloister greets you again, brighter now with full daylight. The drizzle has stopped, leaving the stones slick and shining like polished glass. You draw your robe tighter as a draft sneaks down the corridor. The smell of rain still hangs heavy, earthy, and sharp. Somewhere, a dog barks beyond the abbey walls, a reminder that the world outside continues, even as you live in this strict rhythm. You catch yourself thinking how different it would feel to eat breakfast in a village house. Perhaps a bowl of porridge, maybe even honey if you were lucky. That thought is chased away quickly. Longing for the outside world is frowned upon. Still, your mind betrays you sometimes, whispering comparisons between this sparse table and the imagined tables of others. You chuckle softly inside your head. Somebody should tell the abbot that daydreams are harder to silence than monks. You walk in line again, back to the scriptorium. On the way, a brother sneezes loudly, and the echo startles a bird from the cloister roof. Feathers scatter down like scraps of parchment. You hide your grin. Even in solemn silence, the world insists on comedy. By the time you reach your desk, the small warmth from broth and bread has already faded, replaced by the chill of the scriptorium. The day of writing waits, long and unwavering. Still, you know that breakfast, however plain, has given you just enough to begin. In this life, just enough is the goal, never abundance. One last glance back at the refectory door makes you wonder if perhaps tonight's meal will feel more generous. But hope is a dangerous luxury here, so you set it aside, settle into your stool, and rest your palms on the cool wood of the desk. The abbot's footsteps echo down the rows, reminding everyone that duty does not wait for comfort. The scrape of a quill against vellum begins nearby, the faintest whisper of ink on skin. Soon, it will be your turn. But for now, you let your mind hold on to the memory of bread and broth, the simplicity of chewing in silence, the way the lector's voice wrapped itself around your hunger. It is not joy exactly, but it is a kind of peace. And so, the morning meal passes, leaving you ready, or at least resigned for the labor that follows. The scriptorium is not large, though to you it feels like an endless sea of desks. Each one is rough-hewn, scarred with the grooves of generations of quills scratching across vellum. The air is cool here, drawn from high, narrow windows that let in weak light, but plenty of drafts. Your seat is in the second row, near enough to watch the abbot's shadow glide across the wall whenever he checks on progress. The desk before you holds the simple tools of your craft, a block of wood, a small knife, and a handful of goose feathers, waiting to be transformed into quills. You pick up the first feather. It is long, sleek, and surprisingly oily to the touch. The down near its base is soft, though that part must be trimmed away. You take the knife and begin scraping, shaving away the soft fibers until the shaft is bare and smooth. The smell of the feather is faintly barnyard, a reminder that every tool you touch begins in the messy world outside these walls. The knife blade glints in the gray light as you cut into the shaft, slicing an angle at the tip. The sound is delicate, a thin snick each time the steel bites through. You angle the cut again, shaping a narrow point, then split the tip with a tiny flick so that ink will flow evenly. The work is simple, but it demands care. A slip of the knife ruins the feather entirely. You chuckle at the thought. An entire goose gave up a feather, and you still might botch it. No pressure. Here's your historical fact. Quills made from goose feathers were the standard writing instrument across medieval Europe, prized for their flexibility and ability to hold ink. And a quirky tidbit. The best feathers supposedly came from geese plucked in winter, when the shafts were harder and less brittle. Some monks swore by left-wing feathers only, claiming they curved more naturally for right-handed scribes. Historians still argue whether this was genuine wisdom or just another medieval superstition born of long hours and sore wrists. You set the first quill aside, its point sharp as a thorn, and reach for the next. The process repeats. Scrape, cut, shape, split. A rhythm develops, the scrape of the knife blending with the rustle of robes and the coughs of brothers bent over their own work. The scriptorium becomes a choir of quiet industry, each sound part of a larger harmony. Your mind drifts as your hands work. You think of the geese themselves, honking on some distant farm, utterly unaware that their molted feathers will one day carry sacred words. If they knew, perhaps they would honk more reverently. Or perhaps, being geese, they would simply chase the nearest monk across a field. You smother a laugh before it escapes. The abbot frowns on mirth during preparation, as though humor might dull the knife. By the time you finish shaping your third feather, your fingers are speckled with down. You brush them against your robe, leaving faint wisp clinging like ghosts of the birds. The desk now holds a neat row of quills, each one angled slightly differently, each one ready for the ink. You flex your cramped fingers, feeling the dull ache of small motions repeated too often. This is only the beginning of the day, and already your body reminds you of its limits. Around you, the other brothers finish their own preparations. One hums softly under his breath until the abbot clears his throat, a sound sharp enough to cut stone. Another monk fumbles his feather, dropping it to the floor, where it skitters under the desk. You watch him shuffle after it, his dignity bending lower than his spine. There's comfort in knowing clumsiness is not yours alone. The light shifts gradually, brightening from gray to pale gold. Dust motes swirl in the beams, turning the air into something almost solid. You watch them spin lazily, tiny dancers in a hall too grand for their size. The thought occurs that perhaps dust is simply the abbey's way of reminding you that every breath contains a history lesson. Another joke best kept inside. Your tools ready. You line them neatly along the desk's edge. The quills rest like soldiers awaiting orders, their points sharp and eager. You run a finger along one, careful not to catch the tip, and imagine the thousands of letters it will carry before wearing down. Words of scripture, copied stroke by stroke, will flow from something as humble as a goose feather. It is almost absurd, but also strangely beautiful. The abbot passes by, his sandals whispering against the floor. He glances at your row of quills and gives the faintest nod, the closest thing to praise you'll receive today. You feel a flicker of pride, quickly smothered lest it grow too large. Pride, after all, is frowned upon. Still, you tuck the feeling into a quiet corner of your heart, a secret ember to warm you through the hours of writing ahead. Your stomach gives a final, faint protest, as though reminding you that bread and broth are already fading from memory. But hunger must wait. The real labor begins soon, with ink and vellum demanding the full measure of your attention. You breathe slowly, steadying yourself, letting the rhythm of your morning settle into place. The quills are sharp. The ink waits in its pot. The vellum rests in neat stacks, pale and expectant. And you, young monk, sit ready at your desk, poised on the edge of a day that will stretch long and slow, filled with letters that march across the page like pilgrims in procession. With a final glance at your row of tools, you straighten your back, place your hands on the desk, and prepare for the first stroke that will carry you deeper into the quiet labor of the scriptorium. The pot of ink sits at the corner of your desk, its lid tightly sealed against the morning chill. You reach for the small stone grinder, its surface worn smooth by years of soot and resin being crushed into powder. Today's task is simple in theory. Mix soot with gum and wine until blackness takes liquid form. In practice, it is messy, sticky, and oddly satisfying. You pinch a bit of soot from a pouch, the fine dust clinging instantly to your fingertips, staining them gray, as though you've already begun writing before a single stroke. You sprinkle the soot into the grinder, then add a few drops of gum arabic. The resin is sticky and sweet-smelling, almost like honey left too long on a windowsill. Finally, you pour in a splash of thin wine, its sharp scent cutting through the heaviness. The mixture pools dark, waiting to be stirred into life. You take the pestle and begin grinding slowly, pressing the soot and resin into the liquid until the paste grows smooth and glossy. The air fills with strange scents, smoky from the soot, tangy from the wine, faintly floral from the gum. It's a cocktail no tavern would dare serve, though you imagine some desperate soul has probably tried. A joke flits through your mind. Perhaps monks discovered ink by trying to drink every odd mixture they could think of until one finally stained the table instead of their tongues. Here's a sober fact. Medieval ink recipes often used soot, iron salts, or tannins from oak galls. Gum arabic acted as the binder, keeping pigment suspended so the quill could deliver it evenly. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some recipes included bizarre additions, like egg whites, fish glue, or even wine, each believed to improve the ink's flow or durability. Historians still argue whether these extras truly enhanced the ink, or were simply the result of monks experimenting with whatever oddities they had at hand. The grinding continues, circular motions hypnotic in their repetition. The paste thickens, black and glossy like liquid midnight. You dip a fingertip into it, smear a streak across the wood, and nod at the depth of its color. Satisfied, you pour the mixture into a small pot lined with wax, sealing it with a cork to keep it from drying too quickly. The pot feels heavier now, weighted with potential words. Around you, the room hums with similar activity, the scrape of stone grinders, the faint plop of resin being added, the occasional muttered curse when a clumsy hand spills soot across a desk. One brother sneezes violently, scattering a fine black cloud over his robe. He stares down at himself in misery, while the others bite their lips to hide smiles. The abbot raises his eyebrows, but says nothing. After all, even holy men can be ambushed by dust. You set aside the grinder, wipe your soot-stained fingers on a rag, and lift the ink pot carefully. The black surface gleams in the light filtering through the window slit, reflecting your face in miniature. You look older in the reflection, shadows deepening the lines under your eyes. Perhaps it is the trick of the ink, or perhaps this labor truly ages you by minutes every day. The first quill waits, its sharpened point ready to dip. But you pause, letting the anticipation linger. There is something almost ceremonial in this moment, as though preparing ink is not just craft, but ritual. Every stroke you will make today owes its life to this little mixture of soot, gum, and wine. It is humbling and absurd all at once. You dip the quill into the pot, watching as the blackness clings to the split tip. A single droplet forms, then holds, surface tension refusing to let go. You bring it to the edge of a scrap of vellum and touch it down. The droplet spreads instantly, blooming into the fibers with delicate veins. The quill glides, leaving behind a smooth, dark line. Success. The ink flows evenly, neither too thin nor too thick. The satisfaction is real, even if the task is humble. You know the hours ahead will stretch long, your hand cramping, your eyes straining. But for now, you revel in the small triumph of ink behaving exactly as it should. Another monk leans across to whisper, breaking the silence at great risk. Don't spill it. His eyes dart to the pot of ink, then back to you, mischief glinting like candlelight. You suppress a grin. In truth, one careless elbow could ruin a page that took weeks to prepare, entire psalms drowned in a single splash. The thought is terrifying and a little funny, like imagining history erased not by conquest, but by clumsiness. You steady your pot, nestle it securely into the carved groove of the desk, and exhale. The air tastes faintly of soot still, though already the smell begins to fade as the ink settles. You rub your thumb against your forefinger, feeling the tacky residue of gum Arabic that clings no matter how you wipe. It will stay there all day, a mark of your trade, as telling as a blacksmith's soot or a farmer's calluses. The light in the room grows brighter as the morning deepens, dust swirling in the beams like tiny stars. You watch them for a moment, then glance down at the quills, the ink, the waiting vellum. The tools are ready, and so are you. But readiness never banishes weariness. You sigh quietly, straighten your shoulders, and remind yourself that this is the work you vowed to do. Not glamorous, not heroic, but steady, shaping words that will outlast even the walls around you. You dip the quill again, the black droplet gleaming at its tip. The page awaits, pale and smooth, a canvas for both holy words and the occasional human smudge. The first true strokes of the day are about to begin. And so, soot, resin, and wine, transformed into liquid thought. You press your sharpened quill to vellum and begin the day's slow labor. The vellum lies before you, pale and taut, stretched smooth across the wooden desk. It is calfskin, scraped and sanded until the surface is firm yet supple. You run your fingertips lightly across it, feeling the faint resistance, the promise of each fiber to hold ink if treated gently. One careless stroke, and the tip of your quill will tear it, leaving a scar that no prayer can erase. That is the risk and the challenge of this work, making words permanent upon something as fragile as skin. You dip the quill into the ink, pause a moment to let the excess drip away, then touch the point to the vellum. The first letter blooms. It is not hurried, nor is it hesitant. The black line glides forward, steady as your breath. You begin with an illuminated initial, though for now, only its skeleton. The outline will be painted later, but your quill gives it its bones, the shape into which color will be poured. The curves are delicate, And your wrist aches already, yet you persist. The letters that follow march across the page like small pilgrims, each carefully formed. There is no rushing. Each word must match the one in the exemplar, the reference manuscript resting nearby. You glance at it often, eyes darting from line to line, terrified of a slip. One wrong letter, one misplaced word, and you risk introducing error into scripture. A sobering fact. Copying holy texts was not only about beauty, but about accuracy. Generations of monks devoted lifetimes to ensuring that not a single phrase was lost, even when their own eyes failed. But amid the seriousness, the human element seeps in. Your mind drifts as the quill scratches. You imagine the person who once owned the original book, perhaps a noble, perhaps a bishop. Did he realize how many cramped hands and sore backs went into the treasure he prized? Did he ever think of the young monk, squinting in dim light, whispering the words as he wrote them to avoid error? Probably not. The wealthy rarely think of calluses. Your quill catches slightly, the ink pooling in a thicker blot than intended. You grimace, then carefully shape the blot into part of the next letter. It is not perfect, but it passes. That is the art of this work, disguising mistakes so that only God, or the sharpest-eyed scholar, will notice. You murmur under your breath, half prayer, half joke. May the blot be forgiven as zeal, not error. Here's your quirky tidbit for the hour. Some monks, faced with mistakes, would add tiny doodles in the margins to distract the reader's eye. Little faces, animals, or grotesques leering beside the sacred text. It was a way of laughing quietly at their own imperfections, while still honoring the words. Historians still argue whether these doodles were tolerated acts of whimsy or subtle protests against the endless monotony of copying. You pause to stretch your fingers, flexing them against the wooden edge of the desk. The joints ache, as though you've aged decades in a few strokes. Your back complains too, hunched over the vellum. You shift slightly, earning a faint creak from the stool. The scriptorium is filled with these small sounds. The scratch of quills, the sigh of tired lungs, the rustle of vellum turned, the cough of dust settling in throats. Together, they create a music of labor, steady and unchanging. Your eyes drift to the margin, and for a heartbeat, you imagine sketching something. A bird, perhaps, like the one you saw in the cloister earlier. Wings spread in flight. You resist. The abbot would not approve. Still, the thought lingers. A tiny rebellion tucked into your imagination. Humor has to live somewhere, even in the silence of holy work. The letters continue. Each one is a small act of patience, a promise renewed. You dip the quill often, wiping away excess ink on a rag, ensuring the flow is steady. The smell of gum and soot clings faintly to your nostrils. Sometimes it makes you sneeze, though today you manage to hold it back. A sneeze at the wrong moment could send a blot flying, and the thought alone is enough to make you tense. You lean closer to the exemplar, tracing a finger under the words as you follow along. The Latin phrases roll in your head, half understood, half memorized. The cadence is soothing, even hypnotic. Sometimes you whisper them softly, just loud enough for your lips to move, but not your voice. It helps you keep the rhythm, like a song hummed to stay awake. The page fills slowly, line after line. Hours seem to pass in minutes, or perhaps minutes in hours. Time blurs here, tethered not to clocks, but to the length of the text. You measure the day not by sun, but by how many lines you've copied without error. By that measure, this morning is successful so far. Only a few lines, but all steady, all clear. A fact you remind yourself of. Each manuscript could take years to complete. Whole lives were spent on a single Bible, its pages filling gradually, like a riverbed accumulating silt. And yet, here you are, adding your grains of effort to that flow. It is humbling, though also tedious. You can hold both truths in your heart at once. The abbot passes behind you, his shadow falling across your page. Your shoulders stiffen, but he says nothing. He pauses, glances, then moves on. Relief washes through you. His silence means approval, or at least the absence of disapproval. In monastic life, that is as good as praise. Your hand cramps again. You set down the quill for a moment, rolling your wrist slowly. The vellum shines under the light, black letters gleaming against pale skin. It is imperfect, yes, but alive. Each stroke carries not just ink, but hours of your life, embedded in the page forever. You think briefly of how many others will read these words long after you're gone. The thought is both comforting and absurd. You may fade into dust, yet your handwriting may linger centuries. Imagine being remembered not for who you were, but for how neatly you shaped the letter A. There's a cosmic joke in that, and you almost laugh out loud. But instead, you steady your hand, lift the quill once more, and dip it back into the pot. The day is long, and the page still waits. Your wrist throbs faintly as you continue to draw out letters, but your eyes, restless and weary, wander toward the margin of the page. The vellum seems too wide, its pale edges like a field, begging for weeds. You glance around. Most of the brothers are bent deeply over their work, their shoulders hunched, their quills scratching steadily. The abbot lingers near the far end of the scriptorium, his gaze fixed on a younger novice, struggling to steady his strokes. For a moment, you feel a sliver of freedom. Your hand, almost without permission, begins to move in the blank margin. The quill dances lightly, not spelling words, but shaping curves. A circle, then ears, then whiskers. Before you know it, a tiny cat peers from the side of the page, as if hiding between psalms. Its tail curls mischievously toward the sacred text, as though ready to swipe at the words. You stifle a chuckle. A sober fact here: many medieval manuscripts are littered with marginal doodles, cats, rabbits, grotesque faces. Even knights jousting with snails appear in otherwise holy texts. Some were playful distractions, others perhaps private jokes, and still others strange symbols, whose meaning is lost to us. A quirky tidbit: in one surviving manuscript, a cat actually walked across the page, leaving inky paw prints behind. A four-legged contribution to sacred tradition. Historians still argue whether these doodles were tolerated as outlets for boredom, or whether they were coded acts of rebellion against monotony. You glance again at the abbot, still distracted. Emboldened, you add a flourish above the cat, a little mouse fleeing toward the corner of the page. It is absurdly satisfying, the way a simple stroke transforms the stern white vellum into a playground. You feel like a child caught in mischief, heart quickening with the thrill of rebellion. The quill returns reluctantly to the holy text. Words must still march forward, neat and orderly, each line echoing the exemplar. Yet now, every time your eyes slide toward the margin, the little cat stares back, a silent co-conspirator. You smile at it, though no one else will ever know. The room continues its rhythm. Scratch, dip, scratch, dip. Occasionally a quill snaps, and a groan escapes a frustrated brother. One mutters under his breath before catching himself, earning a stern glance from the abbot. Silence is sacred here, even when frustration bubbles to the surface. You, however, hide your amusement behind bowed shoulders, letting your eyes twinkle at the absurdity. Your mind drifts again. You imagine future readers centuries from now, turning these pages reverently, their eyes widening when they notice the doodle. Perhaps they'll laugh. Perhaps they'll frown. Perhaps they'll wonder what young monk risked his abbot's wrath for a cat in the corner. The thought delights you. Immortality through mischief, a legacy not of perfection, but of play. The light shifts, and dust drifts lazily through the beams. You notice patterns in it, shapes that resemble wings or halos. Perhaps it is imagination, perhaps divine suggestion, or perhaps just dust, stubbornly refusing to settle. You sigh softly, leaning back for a moment. Your spine pops, sending a ripple of relief through your body. Work here is not only for the spirit, it grinds the flesh as well. The smell of ink lingers on your fingers, gum clinging in stubborn tack. You rub your thumb and forefinger together, listening to the faint squeak it makes. It's oddly comforting, like proof that your work leaves residue not only on the page, but on you. You think of yourself as half man, half inkpot now, your blood blackened by soot. The image makes you grin quietly, another joke to keep yourself sane. A brother to your right lets out a soft sigh, his quill pausing. He lifts his hand, cramped and swollen, and massages his knuckles. You meet his eyes for a moment, both of you sharing silent acknowledgement. The body rebels even when the spirit obeys. He lowers his gaze quickly, afraid to invite notice, but the connection lingers. You are not alone in your discomfort, nor in your need for humor to survive it. Another fact to steady you. The average scribe could spend 6 hours or more each day bent over a desk, producing only a few pages in that time. Manuscripts we admire today as treasures of art were often born from boredom, back pain, and aching hands. The quirky side, though, is that those same manuscripts also contain notes in the margins like, "I am so tired," or "This parchment is bad." Honest complaints, preserved forever. Historians still argue whether we should read these notes as despair, humor, or both at once. You dip the quill again and return to the text. The rhythm resumes, slow, deliberate, patient, but now the cat waits in the margin, the mouse scurrying forever before it. You imagine them alive, keeping you company through the long hours. Your heart feels lighter, your strokes steadier, as though mischief has granted you renewed strength. Time drifts. The sun climbs higher, warming the high stone walls, just enough to send a faint glow across the desks. Shadows shift like slow-moving sundials, marking the hours without bells. The abbot finally strides past your row, his gaze sweeping across your vellum. You freeze, pulse hammering. Will he notice? His eyes linger only on the main text, nodding faintly before moving on. Relief floods you, though your ears still burn with the fear of discovery. The cat remains your secret. You lean closer to the page, quill steady, and continue. Each stroke feels like a balance between duty and humanity, between sacred order and personal spark. You are reminded that even in the most rigid systems, life sneaks into the cracks. Cats, mice, paw prints, sighs, laughter hidden in silence. The page nears completion. Your hand aches, your back stiffens, but you allow yourself one more glance at the doodle. The cat smiles, or perhaps that is your imagination. Either way, you smile back. The work continues, sacred and tedious, but not without its small rebellions. You close your eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of breath and scratch and silence wash over you. When you open them again, the ink is still black, the vellum still pale, the cat still mischievous, and you, still here, still writing, still carrying on the long, slow labor of the scriptorium. Your hand steadies as you turn the page, fresh vellum waiting like untouched snow. The exemplar rests open beside you, its words flowing across the lines in careful script. Today, you continue with the Psalms, a slow river of prayer that must be mirrored without flaw. You dip the quill again, black ink clinging to its point, and lower it to the page. The first line begins, a phrase you have already copied a dozen times in practice, but now it must take its rightful place in the new book. The letters march forward, steady, deliberate. Each stroke is familiar, yet none feels automatic. You whisper softly as you write, syllables shaping themselves in your mouth so that your hand will not betray you. It is a habit most scribes share, murmuring like bees as they labor. The sound is faint in the scriptorium, a hum beneath the scratching, like a hive hidden within stone walls. The psalms themselves feel endless. Praise, lament, petition, hope. They rise and fall in a rhythm that mirrors your own fatigue and persistence. A sober fact for you, the Book of Psalms was one of the most frequently copied texts in medieval monasteries, cherished for its use in daily prayer. The monks sang them, recited them, memorized them, and, of course, inscribed them again and again. But here is the quirky side. Occasional errors crept in, leading to strange variations like an extra hallelujah or a word doubled by accident. Historians still argue whether these slips were true mistakes or deliberate flourishes left by weary scribes seeking a spark of individuality. You pause to sharpen your quill, scraping the tip carefully with the small knife until the point gleams again. The shavings fall onto the desk, curling like tiny ribbons. You brush them away and resume, dipping the quill once more. The ink flows, obedient for now. The words line up neatly across the page. You lean close, tracing each one against the exemplar with your eyes. Your breath slows to match the rhythm, as though you are breathing the words into being. The monotony numbs the edges of thought. Sometimes you realize you have written an entire line without consciously noticing, the way one walks a road and later forgets the stones beneath their feet. But monotony invites distraction too. Your eyes flicker toward the margin, where yesterday's cat still peers out. The doodle makes you smile again, though you quickly bury the smile beneath solemnity. Humor is fuel in this place, though it must be hidden like contraband. You stretch your fingers once more, rolling your wrist to chase away the ache. The scriptorium is hushed except for the scrape of quills, the shifting of bodies on hard stools. Light slants through the narrow windows, striking dust motes into golden sparkles. For a moment, you imagine the light itself as holy ink spilling from the heavens, riding upon the air. A foolish thought, but one that steadies you as your eyes grow heavy. Another brother coughs near the back, a harsh bark that startles the silence. The abbot looks up briefly, then returns to his own reading. A small mercy. No punishment today for an involuntary sound. Still, you hear the cough echo in your head, mingling with the psalm's words. Everything in this place becomes rhythm, even sickness. You dip the quill again and continue. Black lines grow across the vellum like furrows in a field, each letter a seed of devotion planted for future generations. You wonder idly who will read this copy when it is finished. A priest? A scholar? Perhaps a noble family, locked away in a chest until someone remembers its value. You will never know. That is both humbling and slightly maddening. You laugh silently at the thought of some distant reader yawning over your perfect letters, never imagining the hand that cramped to make them. The ink thickens slightly, drying faster as the day warms. You add a drop of wine to the pot, stirring with the quill until it loosens again. The smell rises sharp and sweet, making your stomach twist with hunger, even though the taste is bitter. You imagine for a heartbeat sipping it, but one whiff reminds you this is no tavern. Ink is for vellum, not tongues. The psalm winds on, verse after verse. Your back stiffens, your shoulders knot. You adjust your seat, shift your robe, stretch one leg, then return. The discomfort is constant, but you learn to live alongside it, like an unwelcome guest who refuses to leave. Your thoughts drift to stories whispered in the cloister, of scribes who went blind from years of straining in dim light, of others who left behind only half-finished books when their hands could no longer hold a quill. A sobering legacy, but a true one. You glance at your own fingers, stained black, trembling faintly. The work shapes the body as surely as it shapes words. You write another line, then another. The hours slide by like beads on a string, indistinguishable except for the slow progress across the page. By the time you pause, the psalm has advanced far enough to fill nearly half a leaf. You exhale, relieved, though the remainder still stretches long ahead. The abbot's footsteps echo again. He passes behind you, glances at your work, and nods faintly. Praise unspoken, but understood. You bow your head slightly, grateful not for words, but for silence. Silence means you are safe, and safety here is as nourishing as bread. You dip the quill one last time before setting it aside. The letters gleam black against the vellum, steady and true. Another fragment of scripture lives again, carried from one hand to the next. Your body aches, your mind drifts, yet you have built something lasting from soot and skin. And though you will return to the Psalms tomorrow, and the day after, and perhaps for years to come, you allow yourself a brief smile. Somewhere in the margin, the cat still prowls. Somewhere between the lines, your weariness, your humor, and your devotion all hide together. The page is finished. You close your eyes briefly, inhaling the smell of ink and vellum, letting it settle into your bones. Then you open them again, ready for the next page, the next verse, the next long stretch of quiet labor. The psalm on your desk rests half-finished, the black lines gleaming faintly in the shaft of light that cuts across the scriptorium floor. You lift your quill again, dip it, and steady your wrist. The words march forward, neat as soldiers, until one particular phrase catches your attention. The exemplar reads, Dominus illuminatio mea, the Lord is my light. You pause, quill hovering. It is a simple phrase, but the brothers have been debating it for weeks. When the bell releases you from the scriptorium for a short break, you shuffle out into the cloister. The cold air clings to your robe, but the freshness is welcome after the ink-heavy stillness. A few brothers gather under the arches, speaking in hushed tones. Debates here are never fiery in volume, only in persistence. You join them, listening as one insists the phrase speaks of literal light, of sun and stars created by God as signs of His presence. Another argues it is allegorical, a symbol for wisdom guiding the faithful. You lean against the damp stone, letting the voices wash over you. These disputes are quiet, yet stubborn, like two rams butting heads in slow motion. A historical fact anchors you. Monastic communities often wrestled with interpretation, line by line, verse by verse, convinced that meaning could be unlocked with patience. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some monks were so zealous in their arguments that they scribbled notes in the margins of manuscripts, directly contradicting the text they were meant to preserve. Historians still argue whether these marginalia were tolerated as scholarship or condemned as arrogance. You listen as Brother Simon, tall and lean, raises his hands like a conductor. "It is both," he says, voice calm but insistent. "Light of creation, light of wisdom. To argue one against the other is to miss the truth." His tone is smug, the kind of certainty only monks or politicians can carry. You bite back a smile, imagining how easily he might win an election with that line. Another brother scoffs softly. "If it is both, then it is neither." The words hang heavy, yet no one replies. You think, not for the first time, that some debates are less about reaching truth than about filling silence. Still, the act of questioning keeps the mind alive, even when the body wilts from hours of copying. You wander toward the garden at the center of the cloister. Thin winter herbs cling stubbornly to their beds, smelling faintly of mint and sage. A raven perches on the well, tilting its head as though listening to the monks. You imagine it offering its own interpretation of the psalm, perhaps a loud caw that settles the matter once and for all. The thought makes you grin, though you keep your eyes down, lest the abbot mistake amusement for disrespect. The bell tolls again, calling you back. You file into the scriptorium, mind buzzing with fragments of the debate. Sitting once more at your desk, you dip the quill, determined to continue. Yet as you shape the letters, you cannot help but wonder, what if meaning changes with each hand that writes it? What if the phrase means one thing for you, another for the brother beside you, another still for the reader 100 years hence? Your quill scratches steadily, though your mind wanders. You think of the men who copied these same psalms centuries ago, perhaps debating the same line. You think of the readers yet unborn, whose eyes will move across the words without ever knowing your name. The thought is dizzying, like standing on a cliff and looking both forward and backward in time. The ink thickens again. You stir it, muttering a small prayer that it will not clump. As you dip, you notice a tiny bubble rising on the quill tip. You touch it carefully to the rag, watching it burst with a soft pop. Even ink has its rebellions. The abbot passes behind you once more. He stops near Brother Simon, frowning slightly. "Too wide," he murmurs, tapping the margin where the text has drifted. Brother Simon bows his head, chastened. You suppress a small, mean thought of satisfaction, remembering his smug certainty in the cloister. Perhaps wisdom shines brighter on the page than in the mouth. You return to your own lines. The phrase repeats, steady and unwavering. Dominus illuminatio mea. You write it carefully, imagining light seeping from the letters themselves. Your hand cramps again, and you flex your fingers. The cat doodle from earlier still watches, tail curled mischievously. You smile faintly. Perhaps the cat too has an interpretation of the psalm. Light is simply the warmth of the sun on fur. Hours stretch, broken only by the rhythm of copying and the weight of silence. Yet your mind holds on to the debate like a pebble in a shoe. Literal light or symbolic? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Historians still argue, monks still argue, you too argue silently with yourself. But the page demands obedience, not answers. The letters continue, black and steady, until the psalm's cadence fills you completely. When the bell calls you again, signaling midday meal, You set down your quill with relief. The page gleams, neat and orderly. You rub your wrist, sore but proud, and glance once more at the phrase. Light, wisdom, creation. It all glimmers for a moment, then fades as hunger gnaws at you. You rise, falling into line with the others. The debate lingers in the air, unfinished, as all debates are. Yet you carry it with you, tucked between your ribs like a small ember. Perhaps later, in the cloister, you will hear new voices add to it. For now, the only certainty is bread, broth, and silence. You follow the line of robes out of the scriptorium, ink still staining your fingers, the psalm echoing in your head. The Lord is my light. Whether sun, wisdom, or both, you know only this. It guides your hand, steadying the quill even when your mind drifts. The refectory once again greets you with the heavy scent of boiled vegetables. Steam curls from the bowls placed neatly along the benches, each portion identical, each promise of flavor equally thin. Today's offering is cabbage stew, with perhaps a hint of onion, if your nose is not fooling you. The bread is coarse again, cut in uneven hunks, its crust dark and stubborn. You settle into your place, the wood of the bench hard beneath you, the robe scratching at your arms as though determined to keep you from ever feeling comfortable. The lector begins his reading, voice carrying across the beams. Latin syllables tumble steadily, some clear, others swallowed by the echoes. You bow your head as the words roll on, though your stomach pulls your attention elsewhere. You dip the bread into the stew, softening it before chewing. The flavor is simple, earthy, with the faint bitterness of cabbage lingering at the edges. It fills your mouth without quite satisfying, a reminder that meals here are for sustenance, not delight. A plain fact, medieval monastic diets were famously sparse, often vegetarian, except for feast days. Meat was considered a luxury, sometimes even a temptation. Yet here's the quirky tidbit. Monks were inventive in bending the rules. Fish, for example, was often permitted, and in some coastal monasteries, beaver tails were classified as fish, so they could be eaten during Lent. Historians still argue whether this was clever adaptation or outright cheating wrapped in piety. You spoon the stew slowly, letting the warmth spread through your chest. Around you, the other brothers eat in silence. The only sounds the scrape of spoons and the occasional cough. The lector drones on, reading from a tale of a saint's journey, the words rising and falling like a tide. You half listen, half count the bites of bread remaining. The bench creaks as someone shifts beside you, a reminder that bodies grow restless even when souls are meant to be calm. Your own spine protests, stiff from hours in the scriptorium. You imagine yourself a parchment stretched too tight, fibers ready to snap. The stew, at least, offers a brief reprieve, softening the knots in your belly, if not in your back. As the meal ends, bowls are gathered quickly. There is no lingering, no savoring of flavor, no casual talk. The abbot signals with a nod, and the bench is empty in orderly silence. You shuffle back into line, stepping out into the cloister once more. The bell has not yet rung for work, and you feel the weight of weariness pulling you down. A nap, perhaps, stolen in the brief gap before duty resumes. You slip away toward a quieter corner of the cloister, where the stone bench rests beneath an arch. The air here is cool, touched by a faint breeze, carrying the scent of wet earth. You settle onto the bench, leaning back against the pillar, your eyes half closing. The sounds of the abbey fade into a gentle hum. Footsteps echoing, birds chattering, the distant creak of wood. Sleep comes quickly in this life, as though your body seizes every chance to rest. You drift, head nodding, breath evening out. Images flutter through your mind. Ink bleeding across vellum, cats in margins, shafts of light cutting through dust. They swirl together until you are unsure whether you dream or simply remember. A fact to ground you. Monks often took short naps after midday meals, a habit born of necessity. The early rising for prayers left bodies starved of sleep, and even abbots tolerated brief dozing in the hours after sext. The quirky tidbit: some rules permitted napping only if one remained seated upright, lest the indulgence of lying down prove too luxurious. Historians still argue whether these naps were a concession to weakness or a deliberate part of balancing spiritual and physical needs. You stir as the bell tolls again, its deep voice shaking the air. The nap has been short, but enough to refresh you slightly. You rub your eyes, stretch your arms, and rise from the bench. Your body feels heavier than when you sat, but your mind is clearer, the fog of fatigue lifting just enough. You rejoin the line of brothers filing back toward the scriptorium. The rhythm resumes, sandals against stone, robes brushing, silence reigning. You think fleetingly of the outside world, where naps might stretch lazily on soft beds, where meals might end in laughter. But you dismiss the thought quickly. Here, everything is measured, rationed, restrained, and somehow, within the restraint, there is still peace. Back at your desk, the vellum waits. The quill rests where you left it, ink still glistening faintly in the pot. You settle once more onto the stool, your back groaning in protest, and place your hands on the wood. The nap has granted you enough strength to face the next hours, though you know the cycle will repeat. Aching, writing, pausing, aching again. The scriptorium hums with quiet labor. Brothers bend low over their pages, faces lit by slants of sunlight. The air tastes faintly of cabbage still, the stew lingering in your mouth as ink scent rises in your nose. You chuckle silently at the odd combination: prayer flavored with cabbage, scripture scented with soot, monastic life reduced to smells. And so you prepare yourself for the next stretch of writing. Another psalm waits, its words timeless, its letters demanding your hand. Your nap, brief though it was, has given you the courage to continue. The page will not fill itself, and your place in this rhythm is clear. You lift the quill, dip it, and begin again, the lines spreading slowly across the vellum. Bread, broth, nap, and now ink. Each part of the cycle that defines your life. There is no escaping it, only leaning into the rhythm until it becomes indistinguishable from your own breath. The scriptorium grows warm as the sun climbs higher, light spilling through the tall, narrow slits of windows. Shadows sharpen across the desks, and the gleam of ink on vellum becomes harder to see. You lean forward, squinting at the lines you've just copied, your eyes stinging with fatigue. It is a slow surrender, this constant tension between clarity and blur. Your hand aches, yet you press onward, quill scratching steadily across the pale surface. At last, the bell tolls again. You set the quill aside with relief, flexing your stiff fingers. The abbot rises and signals. Brothers place covers over ink pots, close their exemplars, and stand in silence. Together, the scriptorium empties. You fall into line, shuffling once more across the cloister. The air outside is brighter now, the sky tinged with a weak blue, though clouds gather at the horizon like smudges of ash. This pause is not for food or for sleep. It is for the library chest, You follow the procession into a smaller chamber, its door heavy with iron bands, its lock massive enough to guard treasure. The room inside smells of wax, leather, and dust, an aroma richer than stew, more intoxicating than wine. Against the wall sits a great wooden chest, iron hinges dark with age. This is the abbey's heart, more precious than relics of saints or gold chalices. Within it lie books, fewer than 20 perhaps, but to you they seem infinite. The abbot unlocks the chest with a large key that hangs from his belt. The click of the lock is ceremonial, each turn of iron a reminder of the rarity of what lies inside. The lid creaks open, releasing the scent of parchment and ink, a smell that seems older than the abbey itself. Brothers step forward in order, reverent, as though approaching an altar. A plain fact. Most medieval monasteries owned only a handful of books. Each one represented years of labor, a fortune in materials, and often the survival of knowledge that might otherwise vanish. A quirky tidbit. Some abbeys chained their books to lecterns, not out of reverence, but to prevent theft, since books were worth more than livestock. Historians still argue whether the scarcity of books hindered or enhanced learning, since each page demanded such focus that memory was sharpened by necessity. When your turn comes, you step forward, hands trembling slightly. You lean over the chest and glimpse the treasures within. Vellum bindings, some plain, others decorated with faint gilding, lie stacked carefully. Their edges are uneven, their spines cracked with age. One bears a clasp of bronze, another a strip of red leather, faded and worn. You long to touch them all, to open them, to inhale their secrets. But the rules are strict. Only the abbot chooses what you may handle. Today he selects a psalter bound in dark calfskin, its surface polished smooth. He places it in your hands with the weight of a newborn child. You bow slightly, holding it close, then retreat to a bench against the wall. The book is heavy, thicker than your arm, its pages stiff with age. You open it carefully, the spine groaning, the pages whispering as they turn. The words within are familiar, yet the script is older, rougher than the clean lines you copy each day. Margins are wide, filled with tiny notes, scrawled by hands long gone. Some are corrections, others brief prayers, others cryptic symbols you cannot decipher. Your eyes linger on one small drawing, a fish, crudely sketched, beside the verse about deliverance. Was it meant as illustration, or as idle doodle? You smile faintly, recognizing the impulse across time. You trace the letters with your finger, feeling the indents where the quill once pressed. Each mark carries the ghost of another scribe's breath, another scribe's cramp, another scribe's muttered prayer. It is as if their lives live still in the grooves of the vellum. You close your eyes briefly, imagining their faces, their voices, their own abbots watching sternly as they labored. Nearby, another brother gasps softly. He has opened a manuscript of saints' lives, richly decorated with gold leaf. The page glitters in the dim light, small suns set into parchment. The abbot clears his throat, reminding everyone to keep reverence, not awe. Yet you cannot help but feel awe, the weight of centuries pressing into your chest. You continue to turn the pages of your psalter. The Latin sings silently in your head, each line a reminder that what you copy each day is part of something vast. You are not merely writing words. You are extending a chain, link by link, that stretches backward and forward through time. For a moment, the monotony of labor feels null, almost holy. The bell tolls again. Too soon. The abbot orders the books returned. You close the psalter reluctantly, pressing the cover shut with care. Returning it to the chest feels like surrender, as though you are giving back a part of yourself. Yet you obey, laying it gently among the others. The lid closes, the lock clicks, and the treasure is sealed once more. As you file out, the smell of parchment lingers in your nostrils. It clings like incense, a ghost of knowledge that cannot be washed away. You walk back through the cloister, sandals whispering against the damp stone, and re-enter the scriptorium. The quills wait, the ink gleams, the vellum beckons. But now, as you sit once more at your desk, you feel different. The weight of the psalter still rests in your arms. The gold still glitters in your mind's eye. You pick up your quill, dip it carefully, and begin again. The words flow with steadier purpose. This page, this line, this letter, they are no longer just labor. They are your link in the chain, your mark in the great chest of memory. And so you bend again to the work, soot and gum spreading across pale skin, carrying words that will one day lie in a chest, locked away, waiting for another monk's trembling hands to lift them into light. The afternoon light slants low, casting longer shadows across the desks as you return to your work. But today is different. Instead of more plain text, your task is illumination. A fresh sheet of vellum waits, its margin wide and empty, like a silent invitation for something more dazzling than black letters alone. On the desk rests a small box of pigments, each carefully prepared and guarded like treasure. You open it, and a shimmer of colors greets you. Red from crushed cinnabar, blue from lapis lazuli, green from verdigris, and most precious of all, gold leaf, folded in delicate squares that seem too fragile to handle. You take a breath. This is no ordinary task. To illuminate a letter is to marry art and scripture, light and ink. Your quill lies ready for the outlines, but first you prepare your brush, a narrow tool made of squirrel hair bound to a slender stick. You dip it into the gesso, a chalky paste mixed with glue, and paint a thin line where gold will later rest. The smell is faintly sour, like wet plaster, and it clings to your fingers. A sober fact: illumination was not merely decoration. It was meant to make the holy text shine, literally, with light, symbolizing divine truth. But here's the quirky tidbit. Sometimes monks slipped little jokes into their illuminations, hiding grinning faces inside the curls of a letter, or slipping tiny devils into the tail of a flourish. Historians still argue whether these playful touches were tolerated as personal signatures or condemned as irreverence. You wait for the gesso to tacky up, the surface just sticky enough to hold the gold. Then, with the breath of a nervous thief, you lift a square of leaf with a fine brush. It flutters, lighter than ash, shimmering as it catches the sunlight. You lay it gently onto the prepared space, pressing with a piece of soft leather. The gold clings, glinting so brightly it seems a flame has sparked on the vellum. You whisper a small prayer, not for sanctity, but for steadiness of hand. The scriptorium fills with quiet sighs and hisses as other brothers attempt their own illuminations. You hear the faint scrape of tools, the occasional sharp intake of breath when gold leaf tears or floats away. One novice swats at a drifting square, only to watch in horror as it vanishes into dust before it can be saved. You bite your lip to keep from laughing, imagining angels giggling at the sight. Your own square settles well, burnished with the smooth stone until it shines like sunlight trapped on skin. You lean closer, admiring the way the letter now gleams. It is only the beginning. Later, Blue and red will swirl around it. Tiny vines and flowers curling into the margins. But already the effect transforms the page. What was once plain is now radiant, words clothed in light. Your hand trembles slightly as you dip into the pigments. The red glows vivid against the pale vellum. The blue deep as twilight. You trace careful patterns, your breath steadying each stroke. The vines grow, curling delicately, leaves sprouting along the stems. Tiny berries dot the design, no larger than pinheads. Each one demands full attention, and each one rewards you with beauty. Time slips away. The monotony of copying has given way to a different rhythm, one of color and shimmer. You feel both freer and more tense, as though walking a tightrope over beauty itself. One slip could ruin the page, but each success makes your heart lift. The abbot passes by, his eyes narrowing slightly at the flamboyance of one brother's design. A knight battling a dragon hidden in the curve of a letter. You hear his muttered disapproval and bow your head quickly, thankful that your own vines are safe, humble enough to pass, though they carry your quiet pride. Another fact grounds you. Pigments were costly, often worth more than silver. Blue from lapis lazuli had to be imported from Afghanistan, making it rarer than gold. Monks sometimes joked that a single letter of blue might be worth more than their year's food. The quirky side. Recipes for colors were as secretive as spells, with odd ingredients like ground glass, urine, or even crushed insects. Historians still argue how much of this was practical chemistry and how much was pure superstition mixed with desperation. You pause, rubbing your eyes. The colors blur and your hand cramps, yet the page shines more with each flourish. You sit back for a moment, watching the way the gold catches the dim light, gleaming like a star trapped in parchment. The effect is almost too much. It dazzles, reminding you that beauty itself can feel like excess in a world of restraint. The bell tolls softly in the distance, signaling the hour's end. You set down the brush carefully, wiping the tip clean. The pigments close back into their box, the gold leaf folded away, the tools resting once more in order. The page remains before you, a blend of black, red, blue, and gold, alive in a way plain script never could be. You know it will be locked away again eventually. It will rest in a chest, its gleam hidden from most eyes. Yet for now, you see it, and that is enough. The light lingers in your eyes as you rise from your stool, stretching stiff muscles. The scriptorium exhales around you, brothers muttering faint prayers of thanks for steady hands, others sighing over mistakes hidden with clever flourishes. You step back, looking once more at your letter, your vines, your starburst of gold. It is your mark, your signature, your spark of beauty tucked into holy words. Whether anyone notices in centuries to come is irrelevant. For now, the page shines, and you have been part of its light. The scriptorium exhales its long-held silence as the bell tolls, signaling the end of illumination for now. You set down your tools, flexing cramped fingers stained with color. The gold glints stubbornly under the dimming light, reluctant to release your attention. But the abbot gestures firmly, and you know better than to linger. You close your pigment box, cap the ink pot, and rise, the stool creaking in relief as you leave it behind. The cloister greets you with air cooler than the scriptorium, the breeze carrying faint traces of damp earth and smoke from the kitchens. Brothers scatter into small knots, their sandals whispering against the stone. This is not formal debate now, nor prayer, nor silence mandated by rule. It is the thin slice of time when gossip slips through the cracks, traveling faster than the sound of bells. You join a group huddled near a pillar. Their voices are low but urgent, the kind of whispers meant to be secret, but shared anyway. One speaks of a relic rumored to arrive from a neighboring abbey, a splinter of the true cross, or so the tale insists. Another mutters doubts, pointing out that every abbey within 3 days' walk seems to have its own splinter, enough to build a small cottage if nailed together. A chuckle ripples quietly, suppressed before it can grow loud enough to summon disapproval. A sober fact anchors this moment. Relics were central to medieval devotion, drawing pilgrims and donations that kept abbeys alive. Their authenticity, however, was often questionable, with countless bones, cloths, and fragments circulating through Christendom. The quirky tidbit? Some relics were so odd that even monks doubted them, like the so-called milk of the Virgin Mary, kept in tiny vials and proudly displayed. Historians still argue whether these relics were treasured sincerely by communities or cynically promoted by abbots seeking prestige. Another brother leans in, voice barely audible. He claims he overheard travelers speaking of raids on a distant village, soldiers stripping homes bare for coin and grain. The abbey walls may feel secure, but fear seeps in nonetheless. You shift uneasily, imagining the chaos outside these cloisters, the hunger, the fire. Your life here may be dull, but dullness itself is a luxury compared to the world beyond. The conversation drifts back to lighter topics. Someone jokes about Brother Peter's snoring during last night's compline, comparing it to the growl of the abbey's old hound. Another whispers that the cook secretly adds nettles to the stew, disguising them as cabbage leaves to stretch the meal. You smile faintly, relieved by the triviality. In a world bound by silence, even such gossip feels like a feast. You stroll slowly along the cloister walk, the stones worn smooth by centuries of feet. A novice hurries past, nearly tripping over his own robe, clutching a bundle of firewood. His face flushes as the others stifle laughter. You shake your head gently, remembering your own awkward stumbles in the early days. Even in this strict world, clumsiness is a language everyone understands. The bell tolls again, sharp and insistent. The chatter dissolves like mist, replaced instantly by the rustle of robes as brothers reform into orderly lines. Conversation vanishes, as though it had never existed. Silence reclaims the cloister, efficient and absolute. You lower your gaze, folding your hands within your sleeves, and follow. Back inside, the church glows dimly with candlelight. Evening approaches, and with it vespers. The chants begin low, voices rising and falling like slow waves against the stone. You mouth the words, your voice blending into the collective. Yet the whispers from the cloister linger in your mind. Relics, raids, nettle stew, threads of humanity woven through the solemn fabric of prayer. The abbot's voice leads the psalms, strong and unwavering. Yours trails behind, softer, worn from the day. As the verses flow, you find yourself humming inwardly, letting the chant carry you. The sound is hypnotic, smoothing the rough edges of your thoughts. For a moment, the fear of raids and the absurdity of relics both fade into the background. All that remains is rhythm, breath, and stone. But when the final amen fades, reality returns. Candles gutter, shadows stretch, and the abbot dismisses you with a curt nod. The community disperses once more, filing back into the cloister. The gossip will return later, no doubt. Gossip always finds its way through cracks in silence. For now, though, the rhythm pulls you toward the refectory once more, where another simple meal waits. You glance over your shoulder at the candlelit nave, feeling both awe and weariness. Awe at the beauty of the voices woven together, weariness at the endless repetition. You sigh softly, thinking again of the whispers in the cloister. Perhaps relics and rumors are not distractions, but necessary anchors, keeping the brothers tethered to something beyond endless prayer and parchment. Your sandals scrape lightly against the stone as you move back into the evening routine. Hunger stirs again, mild but persistent, reminding you that no matter how holy the abbey claims to be, its brothers remain very human, aching, hungry, curious, and prone to whispers in the shadows. And so you continue, folded into the rhythm, carrying with you both the chant of psalms and the murmur of gossip, each shaping your night in equal measure. The candles flicker as you step once more into the church, their flames trembling against the draft that slides through the heavy wooden doors. Evening has arrived, and with it the service that bends the day toward night. You file into your place among the stalls, lowering yourself onto the wooden seat. The timber is worn smooth by centuries of knees and elbows, but no amount of wear makes it comfortable. Your robe pulls at your shoulders as you settle, and you release a long breath, ready for the slow tide of chanting. The abbot signals, and the hymn begins. The voices rise in unison, low and steady, the syllables of Latin tumbling into one another like stones in a stream. You join, though your throat is dry, and the note wavers before finding its balance. The church absorbs the sound, sending it rolling upward into the vaulting before spilling back down like an echo. Each phrase feels heavier in the evening, as though the words are pulling the weight of the day with them. The smell of melted wax grows thick as the candles drip steadily. Drops of golden liquid slide down, cooling into twisted stalagmites on the holders. You watch one bead swell until it lets go, splattering onto the stone floor. The sight distracts you, and you nearly miss your cue. You catch yourself just in time, lips forming the word as your eyes flicker back to the Book of Psalms. A plain fact: the evening office, known as Vespers, was central in the daily cycle of prayer, marking the transition from work to rest. The monks sang psalms and hymns as the light faded, giving thanks for the day and seeking protection for the night. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some records note that monks occasionally dozed off mid-service, their heads nodding forward until they startled awake. Historians still argue whether abbots turned a blind eye to such lapses, or whether sleepy brothers were harshly corrected. Your own eyelids grow heavy as the chant continues, the rhythm lulling rather than stirring. You bite the inside of your cheek to stay awake, the taste of copper faint on your tongue. You wonder, not for the first time, if the chants are designed less to inspire devotion than to test endurance. If holiness is measured in the ability to resist nodding off, you think, then surely sainthood could be earned by simply staying conscious until the final Amen. The chant shifts key, voices climbing higher, filling the nave with a brightness that shakes you from your drowsiness. You breathe deeper, the notes vibrating in your chest. For a moment, you lose yourself in the sound, your voice indistinguishable from the dozens around you. It is almost comforting, being swallowed by the choir, your own imperfections dissolved into the tide of voices. A brother beside you coughs softly, and the sound echoes more loudly than it should. Heads turn, but no one speaks. The chant resumes its flow, unbroken, though the cough lingers in memory. Small human noises always do. They remind you that behind every holy syllable is a weary body, aching and imperfect. The hymn ends, and silence settles. Candles gutter, shadows sway across the stone walls. The abbot intones the final prayer, his voice measured and calm, and the brothers respond in unison. Your own voice feels thin, but it rises with theirs, filling the space with one last effort. The dismissal comes quietly, just a nod, and the service is over. You rise with the others, your knees stiff from stillness, your back complaining. The benches creak as men shuffle out, the sound of sandals on stone, a softer echo of the voices that filled the hall. You step into the cloister again, and the evening air greets you cool and damp. The sky above the courtyard glows faintly purple, the last light of day fading. A star or two pricks the horizon, shy at first, but steady. You tilt your head back to see them, their quiet persistence somehow more moving than all the chants. No abbot commands the stars, no bell signals their appearance. They arrive without ritual, yet they feel sacred all the same. The brothers disperse toward the refectory. You follow, though your mind lingers on the candles dripping, the cough echoing, the stars rising. Each moment feels stitched together into the fabric of the day. None extraordinary, yet all necessary. Inside the refectory, the candles burn lower, their light softer than in the church. The benches await, bowls and bread set in neat rows once more. Tonight's meal is thin again. Perhaps lentils this time. Perhaps peas. It is hard to tell in the dim light. The lector will read as always. The silence will stretch. The spoons will scrape. You know the pattern, as surely as you know the beat of your own heart. Yet you also know that outside, the stars are climbing, scattering themselves freely across the night sky. You tuck that thought into your chest as you sit, ready to face the ritual once more. The refectory's air is heavy with the smell of smoke and wax, faintly laced with the earthy scent of peas simmered to pulp. You take your place on the long bench, the wood groaning under the weight of tired bodies. A bowl waits in front of you, its contents dark, steaming faintly, with a slice of bread set alongside. The bread is dense and coarse, the kind that resists teeth as much as it fills bellies. You lower your gaze as the lector begins to read, his voice echoing from the raised pulpit at the side of the hall. Tonight's reading is from a saint's life, the story of a hermit who lived alone in the desert, subsisting on roots and rainwater. You sip your stew slowly as the lector describes the hermit's trials. The broth tastes faintly of earth, its texture closer to gruel than soup, but hunger makes it welcome. You dip the bread into the bowl, softening its edge before chewing, letting the saint's tale fill the silence around you. A plain fact. Readings during meals were intended to remind monks that even eating was an act of devotion, never divorced from prayer or reflection. But here's a quirky tidbit. Records show that some lectors deliberately chose the driest, dullest texts they could find, joking that it discouraged overeating by putting everyone to sleep. Historians still argue whether this was mischief or simply a matter of taste, since what seemed dull to one monk might have been inspiring to another. You chew steadily, the bread softening in your mouth, and glance around the hall. Shadows flicker across the faces of your brothers, some intent on the reading, others staring blankly at their bowls, lost in thought. One novice tries to keep his eyes open, blinking furiously as his head droops. The abbot's gaze sharpens in his direction, and the novice startles awake, nearly spilling his stew. You smother a smile into your sleeve. The lector drones on about the hermit's visions, the voice as steady as the scrape of spoons. The sound of chewing fills the gaps, a strange orchestra of slurps, cracks, and sighs. You wonder briefly if holiness might be measured in the patience to chew silently through a crust of bread without cursing. Your bowl empties quickly, though your hunger lingers. You tear the bread into smaller pieces, stretching the meal as long as possible. The saint in the story survives on roots. You suppose you can survive on crumbs. You picture him gnawing on a twig in the desert and almost laugh. Then again, perhaps he would envy even your thin stew. Perspective is everything. When the lector closes the book, silence deepens again. The abbot gives a small nod, and the bowls are gathered. You rise with the others, sandals scraping against stone, and file out into the cloister once more. The night has thickened, stars now bold against the sky. The air is cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of moss and distant wood smoke. The scriptorium calls again, but not for copying or illumination. Tonight you must finish a page begun earlier, lamplight guiding your strokes. You return to your desk, where a small oil lamp burns low, its flame trembling in the draught. The vellum gleams faintly in the soft light, the half-finished lines waiting for completion. You dip the quill carefully, watching the ink catch the lamplight, and begin. The letters form slowly, each one precise, though your eyes struggle in the dimness. Shadows leap across the page, and the ink sometimes pools too dark, threatening to bleed. You steady your hand, breathing evenly, determined to finish. A plain fact, monks often worked into the evening by lamplight or candle, though poor illumination strained their eyes terribly. A quirky tidbit, some complained openly in margins, writing notes like, "The light is bad," or, "Oh my eyes." Historians still argue whether these complaints were genuine exhaustion or sly attempts at humor slipped into the sacred task. Your own eyes ache now, the lines blurring until you blink them clear. The flame sputters, throwing sparks of shadow across your desk. You pause to adjust the wick, careful not to spill the oil. The smell is sharp, smoky, clinging to your robe. You rub your wrist, cramped from the steady strokes, then force yourself to continue. The silence of the room is deep, broken only by the faint hiss of oil lamps and the scratching of quills. You hear a soft curse from somewhere down the row, quickly followed by a cough to disguise it. You grin faintly, knowing the abbot must have heard too but chooses silence tonight. At last the page fills. You sit back, exhaling long and slow, admiring the steady rows. The illuminated letter from earlier still gleams faintly, catching what little light remains. You feel a flicker of pride, tempered by exhaustion. Another page complete, another step toward a book that may outlast you. You close the inkpot carefully, wipe the quill, and lean back. Your shoulders groan, your neck stiff. The lamp sputters again, its flame shrinking. You know this is the signal to stop. You rise, joints protesting, and blow gently on the flame. Darkness folds around you, leaving only the faint glow of others finishing their tasks. The abbot dismisses the room with a gesture. You file out again, the cloister now fully dark, only moonlight silvering the stones. The air is cold, biting at your cheeks, yet it feels good after the stuffiness of the scriptorium. You walk slowly toward the refectory again, where the night's final drink of ale awaits. Your body is heavy, but your mind hums with the rhythm of the day. Prayers, meals, quills, gossip, chants, gold leaf, and now lamplight. It is endless, yet it holds you steady, like a wheel turning without pause. The benches creak once more as you sit. A small wooden cup of ale passed into your hand. The drink is weak, more water than strength, but it warms your throat. You savor it, brief as it is, and glance around at the faces of your brothers. Some are weary, some peaceful, some still tense with the day's labor. All of you, bound together by this rhythm, carry the same ink stains on your fingers, the same hunger in your bellies, the same chants in your throats. And so the evening draws on, the lamplight fading into memory, the ale into your stomach, the chants echoing still in your ears. Soon, sleep will claim you. But for now, the page you finished glows in your mind like a small star, proof that your day was not wasted. The refectory feels different at night, softer somehow, as though the shadows themselves have grown weary from the day's routines. You settle onto the bench, the cup of ale cool in your hand, its surface reflecting the dim glow of candles. The liquid is thin, more like tinted water than true drink. But you sip it anyway, letting the mild warmth spread through your chest. Around you, brothers do the same in silence, their faces half hidden, their eyes heavy. This is the final communal act before rest, a small punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. The ale is weak, yet it has its place. A plain fact: monasteries brewed their own drink, often low in alcohol, both safer than water, and nourishing enough to supplement poor diets. The quirky tidbit: in some houses, brewing was considered so important that a monk could be excused from prayer to tend the vats. Historians still argue whether this reflected genuine necessity or a quiet acknowledgement that even monks longed for a taste of comfort. You cradle the cup, breathing in the faint scent of malt, and glance down the row. Brother Peter yawns, nearly dropping his drink, while Brother Simon swirls his cup with surprising attentiveness, as though studying the play of light on liquid could reveal divine secrets. You smile faintly at the thought, though you hide it behind the rim of your cup. When the last drops are gone, the abbot rises. His gesture is enough. The benches scrape, robes rustle, sandals scuff against stone. You file out, the night air striking your face with a chill sharp enough to clear your head. The cloister is dark, the moon a pale lantern above, clouds drifting lazily past. You breathe deep, savoring the freshness after the stale smoke of the hall. The day is nearly done, but not fully. You follow the line of brothers back into the scriptorium, where one last duty waits. A page begun earlier must be completed, even if by tired hands and sore eyes. You sit once more at your desk, the oil lamp flickering faintly. Its glow is weak, but it pools just enough light to see the waiting lines. The vellum gleams pale under the flame, a final demand before rest. You dip the quill carefully, watching the ink catch in the dim glow, and begin to copy again. Your strokes are slower now, the letters less fluid, but each one holds steady enough. The fatigue seeps into your bones, yet the rhythm keeps you moving. Dip, stroke, breathe, repeat. The quiet in the room is deep, broken only by the scratch of quills and the occasional sigh. You feel yourself drifting, your eyelids heavy, the words on the page blurring. For a moment, you wonder if you have written the same phrase twice, the lines too alike to be certain. You lean closer, squinting, then nod in relief when you see the difference. The fear of error sharpens your focus, keeping you awake. Another plain fact: errors in manuscripts could take hours to repair, sometimes requiring whole sheets of vellum to be scraped or replaced. The quirky tidbit: in some manuscripts, frustrated scribes simply left their mistakes visible, adding a note in the margin like, "I am sorry, but I was tired." Historians still argue whether such honesty was tolerated or frowned upon, but the notes endure, proof of human frailty immortalized in ink. You rub your eyes, the lamp's glow swimming in circles. A cough echoes from across the room, followed by the sound of someone shifting heavily on a stool. The abbot glances up, his shadow stretching long across the wall, but says nothing. Even he seems softened by the lateness of the hour. Your page nears completion. You trace the final line, watching the letters settle into place. The ink dries slowly in the cool air, dark against the pale skin of the vellum. You blow gently across it, the breath making the flame tremble. And then you set the quill aside. Relief washes over you, though it is tinged with exhaustion so deep it feels like sinking. The abbot signals again, and the lamps are extinguished one by one. Darkness floods the room, save for the faint glow of moonlight through the high windows. You rise, your joints stiff, your eyes burning. The brothers shuffle into line, the rhythm of sandals returning, slower now, wearier, as you move through the cloister toward the dormitory. The air outside is crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp stone and night flowers. You tilt your head back once more, catching sight of stars scattered like grains of salt across black velvet. Their quiet persistence steadies you, reminding you that even in endless repetition, something endures. You reach the refectory once more for the final meal. Thin ale, stale bread, a last chance to sit together. The laughter is absent now, replaced by silence, but there is still comfort in the shared presence. You eat slowly, your thoughts already drifting toward the straw pallet that waits. When the abbot dismisses you, you rise with the others, your body heavy yet oddly light, as though ready to float into sleep. The dormitory lies ahead, shadowed and simple, but it promises rest, and that is enough. The dormitory is dark, except for the faint spill of moonlight through narrow windows. You walk slowly across the stone floor, each step softened by the straw scattered near the pallets. Brothers move in silence, some already lying down, others kneeling briefly in prayer before surrendering to rest. The smell here is a mingling of wool, smoke, and human weariness, a scent that clings to every corner. You find your own pallet, a rough sack of straw covered with a thin blanket, and lower yourself carefully. The straw rustles, poking at your ribs, but you are too tired to mind. You stretch out, your body sighing into the hardness. The wool itches faintly against your skin, the air biting cool on your cheeks. You pull the blanket close, curling slightly to trap warmth. Your fingers still carry the faint tack of ink, black stains that even scrubbing cannot erase. They are badges of the day, marks of labor that follow you into sleep. You close your eyes, but the darkness brings with it the shimmer of gold leaf, the scratch of quills, the echo of chants. The day lives on inside your mind, refusing to quiet at once. A plain fact, monks slept communally in such dormitories, rising together at the call of bells for night prayers. Privacy was scarce, rest often interrupted. The quirky tidbit, some rules forbade brothers from sleeping on their backs, lest temptation creep in. Historians still argue whether such strictures were universally enforced or simply ignored once the abbot's eyes closed. You shift again, pressing your face into the coarse pillow. The straw crackles softly, carrying the faint scent of fields long harvested. Outside, the wind hums low against the walls, a lullaby provided by the world itself. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of others around you, the sound of dozens of lungs weaving together into a strange harmony. The day recedes slowly, each image fading into the shadows. The bells, The chants, the ink, the gossip, the bread and broth, all blur like ink washed by rain. Sleep presses heavier, and soon even thoughts grow faint, dissolving into quiet. You surrender, body slackening, as the abbey wraps you in silence. Now the story softens, the edges blurring, the sounds lowering to a whisper. You are no longer copying, no longer chanting, no longer shivering in the cold cell. You are drifting, like a page turning slowly, the ink of memory fading gently into pale calm. Each breath stretches longer, warmer, and steadier. The day's small burdens, blots of ink, crumbs of bread, stiff muscles, fall away one by one, like dust brushed from the vellum. The abbey grows quiet in your mind. The bells no longer press against your ears. The abbot's watchful gaze no longer weighs on your shoulders. Instead, the candlelight dims until it glows only faintly, like a star just visible in the distance. You follow it not with effort, but with ease, letting your eyes soften, letting your body sink. Outside the dormitory walls, the night breathes steadily. Wind curls along the stones, carrying the faint smell of grass and wood smoke. The sound is soft, unhurried, like a lullaby written by the world itself. You feel it stroke across your skin, not cold, not sharp, simply there, present and kind. Your thoughts slow, drifting like leaves on water. You need not hold them, need not chase them. They may come, they may go, and you remain still, resting deeper with each passing moment. You imagine the straw beneath you growing softer, the blanket heavier, the air gentler. You are safe, you are steady, you are calm, you are allowed to rest. Sleep gathers around you, not sudden, but gradual, the way dusk slides into night. Let yourself lean into it. Let yourself sink. All is finished. All is quiet. All is well.